Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football, get you all caught up with the latest training camp stuff. And we are going to focus on camp battles in this show. So we're going to get you all updated on where we're at on the matchups that we've been watching in training camp, in the games, on our own roster, and try to figure out where things stand with that as we head into the final preseason game, Game 3, against the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field on Friday night. And then cut downs are next week, Tuesday. So a week from today, rosters need to go from 90 to 53. We've got a bit of news for you. One of the issues is not great, but here we are.
Yeah, the news on Njigba is not good, and that is
it's not
something.
Horrible. It's
no,
just not
but
good.
A broken bone is never a good thing. So, yeah, we might as well he had surgery. It's already done by the time we're recording, but we do not know how long he's going to be out. They wouldn't know that until they went in and started cutting.
They did speculate early. Bob Condata reported that they didn't believe it was of serious nature, but just needed fixed. Similar to what Tyler Lockett went through last year, where he only missed a game plus a bye week. Jackson Smith and Njigba has got 3 weeks here to kind of get ready to go. If he misses a week, it's not that big of a deal. If he misses 4 to 6 weeks, that really impacts the roster, and decisions will need to be made. Decisions are going to have to be made anyway. But he broke a bone in his wrist on that big play that he had against the Dallas Cowboys, 49-yard reception, tackled at the 1-yard line. When he came down, he braced himself with his hand, and that thing kind of torqued a little bit, broke a bone in there apparently. This is the first we heard about it this morning, as it was broke by Adam Schefter, and had surgery today in Philadelphia. And there is a chance he'll be ready by September 10th. However, they won't, as Keith said, they won't know until the report comes out from the surgeon, how things went, what they needed to do with the extent of it, and so forth. So a bit of an unknown as we record late Tuesday afternoon. No reports have come out as to the status of that, and we'll just have to kind of keep our ear open for any updates. But it's not great news in that obviously you want Njigba to be healthy, as he's clearly a top 3 wide receiver on this roster, and probably, on any roster. I mean, he's just really going to be one of those impact players immediately. And so it'd be good to have him on the field. In updated news in the wide receiver room, Cade Johnson was cleared from concussion protocol today. So I'll add a body that's familiar with the offense back onto the practice field. And then Seattle also signed undrafted rookie free agent Malik Flowers, just out there. And Seattle's bringing him in for a look. But
yep, out of Montana.
Depending on what happens to Njigba, if he's out long for whatever reason, speculating here, long term, 4 to 6 weeks, Seattle will definitely address that, probably with some sort of veteran presence, I would imagine. But they do have enough. I mean, the competition is pretty fierce for the 4th, 5th, 6th spots on this roster. And we'll talk about that today, update those competition battles a little bit. But they do have some bodies there that could come in and hold down the fort if it was short term.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned, mainly because Tyler Lockett had a similar injury and was out for 1 game. I think it was 2 weeks, but there was a bye week in there, but he missed 1 game. And if that's the case, then Njigba could be ready for the start of the season. And but as you said, we don't know, because we don't know if it is that same level of break or not. but it's supposed to be similar. If it is, then yeah, he can be out there playing. And even if it's longer, it's a couple of weeks into the regular season. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And getting him back, getting him healthy for the long haul of the season will be a huge lift for the offense, simply because they didn't have anybody like him last year. So
Seattle does have a. Go ahead.
I want to say that the offense will be better, just period. So
Seattle does have a couple of options there with the roster, and in Jigba, he would need to be on the 53 when the cutdowns are made, and 24 hours after that, he can go on to IR and miss a minimum of 4 games.
Yeah,
and
I don't think they want to do that.
That would open up a roster spot. Now, the only reason they would do that is if they knew for a fact he was going to be out 4 to 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
If he's only going to miss a couple games, he's going to be on the roster. He's just not going to be active, and they can play around with the roster, have a couple of guys come up off the practice squad that first game and so forth. So they've got a few different options there. It's not do or die by any means. Like Keith said, it is a marathon. We want them for the long haul. It's better if there's any concern at all or any weakness in there or any flexibility issues. And I can't remember which hand it is. I believe it is his left hand, which is better than his right primary hand, but don't quote me on that. I just, from the picture I saw of the actual impact when he put his hand on the ground, looked like it was his left hand. Okay, so let's get into this show. Basically what we're doing today is we're just talking about competition battles on our own roster. There's quite a few different spots that are open as far as the depth is concerned on this roster. Spots, 48 through 53, if you will, are kind of in contention. Everything else is pretty well set. I think all the starters are set at this point. And we can talk about that, I think, after the show, after our recap show, after the game, and before the roster is set to the 53. We'll have a 53-man roster prediction show. I think that'll come out on next Sunday, and we'll talk about all this. But where do you want to start, Keith?
Let's start over on offense, and look, we already kind of talked a little bit about the wide receivers, with because Smith-Njigba is out.
Yeah, we can get into a little bit more in depth to that.
But there's a lot of other stuff going on. Jake Bobo seems to be a lock to make the roster. And if Smith-Njigba is out for Gate Week 1, then Bobo might actually be, he as the third wide receiver, I consider that a starter. And that is an unexpected spot for him.
Right.
But he's looked good in the preseason and in camp.
Who else is there? Let's talk about that. Derek Young has not looked good so far in the preseason. Now, I don't know what that's attributed to, but he's had a few, 4 targets, no receptions, no stats,
2 drops, and 4 targets.
That's not a great look for him to kind of, especially with Bobo and Landers kind of pressing. Eskridge was going to be there and have a good. He started having a good camp. The heat was kind of on Derek Young, and he didn't step up, at least to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we'll see what happens going forward, but it's a little disappointing. And we know about Eskridge, Keith, that he's just not going to be available. He's out.
He's not going to be
weeks.
available for the first 6 weeks, and hopefully he'll be
injured.
healthy when he comes back. We'll see if that ever happens.
So,
but yeah, so you look at, obviously the top 2, they're finally, there's 1 or 2 better duos in the entire league than what Seattle has with their top 2. But without their number 3 guy, and then behind them, you've got Jake Bobo and Cody Thompson or Cade Johnson.
Cody Thompson, this actually is beneficial for Cody Thompson, not wishing injury on anybody, especially one of our starter guys, but it does give Thompson a chance to make the roster. He was real fringy. You take a look at Matt Landers, Jake Bobo, Cade Johnson's back from the concussion protocol now. Cody Thompson had a couple catches, I believe, in the Dallas game.
Mhm.
Aesop Winston is a guy that can also return kicks for you. So,
And also Lindsey,
yeah.
who came on in this game
John
and looked really good, both as a punt and kick returner, and then had a couple of big receptions, including one like fantastic catch on a throw that wasn't as accurate as a quarterback would want it to be, but he was able to go up and get it and turn up field and do some nice things there. So it's a crowded room. I liked it a lot better when it was healthy and you had, Eskridge and Smith-Njigba in there, and this looked like your top four, and then whoever else can get on the field, maybe. But now you're missing two of those guys, and it's good thing Bobo has stepped up. So you've got three guys, but there's two other spots available and like five guys vying for it. It's a very weird spot.
Yeah. And the first game or two could be, some guys we're just not familiar with, and we'll just have to kind of go into the season with that and make do. Tight end room needs to step up a little bit, receivers out of the backfield, etc. Gino's got plenty of weapons. Without Njigba in there, it does become a little wishy-washy, especially with Derek Young, Eskridge not really kind of performing at this point. You're really going to count on Jake Bobo, which is an interesting spot for him. Talk about a quick rise all the way from undrafted rookie free agent to potentially starting your first NFL game on September 10th. That's just wild. All right, let's talk about the quarterbacks really quick. I just wanted to briefly go over that. Drew Lock has had a great performance. I think he's locked in at the number 2 for sure. Gino's at the top, and then you've got Ehlers, Holton Ehlers sitting there, a guy that is essentially having a tryout for the practice squad, if you will, and that's kind of a cool thing. But there is that third quarterback rule this year that may impact him if they so choose to keep him on the practice squad. You can have an emergency quarterback on the roster. So if a team designates an emergency quarterback and they can be activated in the event that the team's first 2 quarterbacks are either injured or disqualified in a game. So he doesn't even have to be, counted on the 53 until they activate him. And they can do that during the game. And that's kind of what that rule is. So they may keep a guy like him around. Now, I don't know if he'd go out and win a game for you, obviously, but, he could hold down the fort. He's learned the offense. It's better than somebody coming in from scratch.
Well, and his ability to, he's a big kid. He's like 260 pounds and runs well. He's hard to take down. He's as mobile as you'll find as far as, a power running quarterback.
Running quarterback. You don't hear that very often.
No, the only other power running quarterback was was Cam Newton. But he does some nice things. And so if you need to rely on him, you don't even have to ask him to run the same offense and do all the Geno Smith things, because you can tailor your offense to a unique skill set, and run, read option kind of stuff and really like take advantage of his feet and then throw off of, getting once teams step up to try and stop that. He is a unique guy, and I like that he's probably going to stick around as that emergency quarterback. I think that, if you've got a lead in a game and your guys get hurt, both of them, and you have to go to your emergency quarterback, I could see him coming in and holding on to a game by running the ball, grinding out some first downs and milking a clock until
and have Jake Bobo come to the rescue again with a high point catch that never was intended to even be caught. I could see something like that happening too. Hopefully we don't have to use that, because that's definitely worst case scenario territory. But I think he does at this point, deserve a spot, at least on the practice squad, and we'll see how that goes. Kenny McIntosh has been injured. I understand he's back at practice finally. Bryant Kobach had 6 carries, 32 yards against the Vikings, and then has not had an opportunity to get back onto the field. He's been battling a little something as well. That's given an opportunity for SaRodorick Thompson to come in, and he's rushed for 14 carries, 64 yards, and a touchdown in his opportunities. That's where this competition is at for maybe a back end deal, definitely a practice squad spot or 2. I think that you're going to see probably 4 running backs carried and 6 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, but that's just me right now. They could go 5 running backs. I doubt it though. We'll see.
I don't see a need because I don't see the talent being there to carry that many. I think you're looking at 4.
Bryant looked pretty competent.
He did, and Thompson looked competent this last week. And does that mean that they're both better than we thought, or does that mean that the third string line against the third string defense is a plus for Seattle, and anyone can run behind that? You know what I mean? Like, is this a line question, or is this a running back talent question? And having gone back,
the only question would be is if Kenny McIntosh hasn't done enough or isn't healthy enough that the team believes that he's ready to go into the season, and they bring a guy like Kobach up.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a different question.
That is a different question. But you're right; these guys haven't done enough to break through, and that was never the intent with these guys. I think the 4 at the top were always going to be the 4. Unless injury was going to happen.
That is true. And we were kind of just expecting that, and having a couple guys pop in a preseason game at the end, in the fourth quarter is nice. It means, hey, maybe we have something on a practice squad guy, but the idea that any of them is more than a injury replacement, I think is, that's just all it is. It says, don't read into it more.
So on the offensive line, really, there were 2 different spots for potential competition when we entered training camp. Phil Haynes against Anthony Bradford, and center Evan Brown, the veteran, against center Oluwatimi, the draft pick. And both ended up reverting to the veterans, and there really wasn't that much of a competition, it turns out.
Not at guard at all. Bradford never really made any kind of play to try and push Haynes in at all. Oluwatimi, I feel, did and was close, but getting banged up after the first game and missing the second one certainly didn't help him, especially since Brown had the lead at that point anyway. And it looks like, we're going into the season with the vets playing. I don't know if they'll finish the season that way. I would be very surprised if Oluwatimi is not getting snaps throughout most of the second half of the season.
Do you know where he's at with his elbow injury?
What I read was that he should be back at practice.
So one pressure allowed all preseason by Evan Brown. So there is some hope. There's some light there. I know that when we talked in June, July, we were kind of building up Oluwatimi as a guy that we thought could definitely come in. He had a track record of coming in 3 different stops in college and taking over the starting role, including Michigan, where he was elected team captain after 2 weeks of spring practice, and won all the awards and all the hardware. And so that's the reason for that. Doesn't mean Evan Brown isn't a competent guy, a competent center. Evan Brown put on a little bit of weight as well when Detroit asked him to play guard. So I think originally he came into the league at like 305, 307. I think he's up to like 320, which is a decent weight for the center position in this division. When you take a look at all the guys that he's going to have to go up against. Now, am I hopeful that he's going to be able to take on those guys, especially from San Francisco and the first week out, the Los Angeles Rams? I'm not so sure, but we'll see. If he's the weakest link along the entire offensive line, I'm okay with that as long as he's competent.
Yeah. I mean, that's, they got through last year with what looked like a lesser player. Evan Brown so far has looked like an upgrade, maybe not a huge upgrade, but an upgrade. And so, yeah, I mean, if that's the worst case, okay, I'm game. It matters more to me what they get out of the right guard spot, because last year they got very little out of Gabe Jackson. And so if they can get a reasonable contribution from Phil Haynes, I think the team will be better. I'm still in the case where I want to see this team go younger at those positions and do better that way. And I know that that's not necessarily the popular opinion, because most people are like, play whoever as long as they win. But I want to see this team get the younger players in there, get them some experience, develop them, because I think Oluwatimi is the long-term answer at center. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. Just for everyone out there, just kind of a little squeamish with Evan Brown. He was the guy. If you remember the Charbonnet run in that Cowboys game, he was in at center, and he had a really nice block against Mozzie Smith to break that run. That's exactly where Charbonnet went. The guard had pulled out to go find the closest linebacker, and our tackle kept our defensive end outside, and Charbonnet was able to run untouched right up the middle there, and Brown actually was the guy that sprung that. So there is some hope.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Levi Brown and some of the other outside edge guys at the tail end of the roster that are competing. So we're looking at essentially Tariq Smith and Levi Brown for that, what would be essentially the sixth spot, the second, third string guys out there, deep rotation guys that might even not suit up, but may, if the special teams play warrants it. Levi Bell's one of those guys.
It would be the fifth and sixth spot, wouldn't it?
Yes.
With Nwasu and Hall, and then Taylor and Mafe.
Yes.
Being the four above them. So we're looking at the fifth and sixth spot. You keep six outside linebackers, edge guys, pass rushers.
I think you do if you keep 2 defensive tackles and 4 defensive ends.
So if you're going into the season with only 6 defensive linemen, then sure, yeah, you can keep all 6 of the outside linebackers, and then I think both those guys make the roster. If you go
That's
in
the way I've got it currently.
With 5, one of those 2 guys doesn't make the roster. And I don't know how you make that decision at this point, because
the reason that I
both
do
of them have looked good. Both of them have looked promising.
The loss really is Jacob Sykes for me. He doesn't make my roster as currently constructed, but Cameron Young and Jerron Reed at defensive tackle, but Miles Adams and Dre Jones can also swing over there if needed. So I've got Cameron Young, Miles Adams, Dre Jones, Reed, Edwards, and Morris making the roster. Jacob Sykes is left out, but definitely on the practice squad. And then I've got Nwasu, Taylor, Mafe, Hall, Smith, Bell, and I mean, I can go through all of it if you want, but I mean, that's essentially the group. And I think I think they would rather keep Smith and Bell only because of the ability to play special teams. They're some of the most athletic guys on the team, and you want to hold on to those guys if you can. Yeah,
those guys both will make a difference on coverage teams and kickoff coverage teams. So I could see them wanting to do that. It's just that's a lot of players to commit to a position where only 2 out of 6 would be on the field at any one time.
I know. I don't know what else to do there, because you really don't want to. I mean, you could get Levi Bell potentially onto the practice squad,
maybe,
if you needed to.
Bell's also been extremely active and has really shown up on the tape from these two games.
Do you think you could get Tariq Smith onto the practice squad?
Yeah.
See?
I don't know that either.
That's
and both of those guys, if you cut either of them, you risk losing them. Because
the real issue, it comes down to inside linebacker too, because that's where you're going to have to make some decisions.
Well, I think the fact that Vi Jones is going to start the year on the IR helps. So you've got, Radigan,
Ben Burkervin, and O'Connell to choose from.
Yeah, for one spot.
Depending on how you count Nick Bellore too.
Nobody counts Nick Bellore.
Well, he's on the team. He's going to make the roster. So where do you put him?
True, but he doesn't count as a linebacker.
Right, but you got to put him somewhere in order to beat him on the 53. I mean, I'm just saying he's got to count somewhere.
He's a fullback.
Okay. That means you potentially only keep 5 wide receivers instead of 6.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. But Levi Bell, definitely. I mean, here's a guy that's got 3 tackles, 8 pressures, 1 sack. Plus, he's all over the place and plays special teams as well. I like him. He's definitely come on. He's only 5'11", 262, something like that. But man, is he active and he's hungry. And a guy like that on the roster is really kind of cool. Now, Tariq Smith, according to Pete Carroll, kind of has come through camp a little late bloomer in camp. But has come on really strong. And Pete said he really needed to see what Tariq Smith was able to do in that second game. And he was impressed. And team high 7 tackles, a sack, tackle for loss.
He was really active.
Yeah.
Really active and active in the backfield a lot. Just getting penetration. There was one where he gave up the outside and setting the edge. And I was in the middle of the play. I was like, oh God, you can't do that. You can't dive inside, but he got inside and then came back behind the tackle and made the play anyway for a tackle for a loss. And I'm like, that is a unique set of athleticism. If you're able to have the running play go outside after you went inside, but you still cut back behind the tackle and make the play. Like that is, you just don't see it. He should have been washed out of the play there, but he still came back and made it. And you go, okay, kid has special athleticism. There's a lot to like there, and really showed just the rest of the game. And as much as I like Levi Bell because he's a great story and all of that, he doesn't have that prototypical size, length, speed, just everything. And so
and they're not going to give up on Tariq Smith. Before he's even started, really. He was out all last year.
Yeah, Smith has the upsides there, and if it's a competition between the two of them and one of them makes it, at this point, as much as I really like Levi Bell and I want to see him succeed, I would have to give it to Smith. He's just got the higher ceiling. He's got that length that Levi Bell just doesn't.
He's had the highest Pro Football Focus grade against Dallas on the defense at 79.9 as well, which is nearly elite.
That is, 80 is elite. So 79.9. Right. Well, let's just call it elite. He had a really good game.
Really good game. All right, let's talk about the linebackers really quick. Bobby Wagner's there. Jordan Brooks is back. That's the surprise. Okay, so wasn't sure if Jordan Brooks was going to come back. Now that throws a wrench into this entire room because you've got Devin Bush, who was going to play for him essentially with Bobby Wagner. Now you've got a trio of guys there that can make plays for you. Those guys are on the roster for sure. And then you've got John Radigan, Vi Jones, Ben Burkervin, Patrick O'Connell. I've got Nick Bellore thrown in there, a guy by the name of Christian Young, who's a convert from a strong safety into a off-the-ball linebacker. That's the group. Now, John Radigan's looked poor this training camp. However, the team really likes him. There's a reason that he's there. Vi Jones been hurt. Ben Burke-Irvin's undersized. We already know what he is. He's coming back from that devastating knee injury. That's a good story. Patrick O'Connell's made some plays, but second, third, fourth string type plays in preseason. I think he's definitely not going to make the roster. So you're really looking at Radigan, Jones, and Burke-Irvin.
Jones is probably starting the year on IR, which gives you Radigan and Burke-Irvin and O'Connell as the guys competing for one spot.
Maybe two. Maybe.
Oh, man, I have a hard time seeing two.
There are three inside linebackers. If you go with Wagner, Brooks, and Bush, and cut Radigan, Jones, Burke-Irvin, O'Connell, and company, and have at least two of those guys show up on the practice squad so you can bring them up.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I expect one of that group to make the roster. So it ends up being four inside.
I do too, but it gets washy because of you kind of wanted to carry 6 corners because the depth there, and now it looks like maybe you have to carry 5 because Jordan Brooks came back. Jamal Adams, it looks like Jamal Adams not going to make it, so that gives you a little bit more flexibility there at safety. You can kind of,
mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I just look at that, and Radigan has flashed. He's made some plays, but he's also missed some plays that you can't win if he's missing those plays.
His missed tackle
in regular season
is not acceptable.
And Burke-Irvin is an elite special teams player, but doesn't offer you anything as a defensive player. And if you're going to make it as, the 52nd or 53rd man on the roster, you better be able to play special teams, which I think actually helps him because he's down far enough on the depth chart that it's not really his ability to be active and do things on defense is less of a big deal because he's such a good special teams player and because he's so far down on the depth chart. And then O'Connell's surprised in these 2 preseason games, and I don't know what to think of him. And these 2 preseason games against a bunch of third and fourth string guys, it makes it really hard to evaluate. It's just not a big sample against elite competition. So, but I think one of that trio makes this roster.
Interesting. That's why this game is going to be so big.
Or none of them do, and they sign someone who's not currently on the roster.
It is true. That could happen. That's why these games, third preseason game, no starters are going to play. It's just going to be kind of a ragtag group, and you're going to face the other teams, second, third, fourth string as well. But there's 3 or 4 spots on this roster that guys their job's on the line, and everyone's job's on the line. But in particular, if you want to make this roster, guys like Radigan, Burke-Irvin, O'Connell, Levi Bell, Tariq Smith, these guys need to have big games to ensure that the coaching staff is going to make sure that they're on the roster for sure.
Yeah, and big games doesn't necessarily mean big stat sheets for defenders, but it could be a big game of just doing your job really well, even if the run goes in the other direction. So you're not involved in a tackle. You held the backside like you're supposed to. You had that backside pursuit to get rid of a cutback lane, which, you know what I mean? Like those are the kinds of things that don't show up on a stat sheet, but they show up on film. And you do all of those things really well. And yeah, I mean, that can be a big game, and that can be enough to get you onto the roster.
The last group I want to talk about, I'm kind of skip over the safeties, Diggs, Love, Reed, Joey Blount, Jonathan Sutherland, all those guys. We could talk about Joey Blount and Sutherland. I think the team really likes Sutherland, but they also really like Joey Blount.
I think that with Adam starting the year on the PUP list, it opens up for all 5 of those guys to make the roster, especially because Sutherland and Blount are such good special teams contributors.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
I can see Reed being pushed through to the practice squad.
If you look at the cornerback group, the Woolen, Witherspoon, Mike Jackson, Trey Brown, Kobe Bryant, Artie Burns situation. That's 6. And and I
11
only
defensive backs is a lot.
and if you've got 4 safeties, that's 7. If you had another one, that'd be 11. That'd be as much as I've seen the Seahawks carry ever. But yeah, decisions will have to be made. Trey Brown versus Michael Jackson. I understand Michael Jackson's just been struggling. I don't know why. But Trey Brown's been playing strong. Now, Devin Witherspoon's coming back into practice. Maybe gets a little run in this game. I don't know. Depends on how advanced he is coming back from his injury. And then Artie Burns, who has been playing very well, just in a steady role. He doesn't, he's not out there. You're not going to call his name a lot, but
in both games, he was, according to Pro Football Focus, was within the top 5 of Seattle defenders in both games so far.
Do you just can a guy like that who's just been doing his job? I mean, the talent is above him is just tremendous.
I think that you hope that he has shown enough that you can get a draft pick for him. That there's a team that lost a corner to injury, needs a vet. Everyone, Artie Burns was a good player coming into Seattle. He's shown really well this preseason. He doesn't cost anything.
Last year, Seattle made the determination that they were just going to carry him and not play him just because they needed that veteran presence. Now, is there enough veteran presence on this roster where they don't need him in that respect anymore? If he's not going to suit up, if he's not going to play, why carry him to begin with?
The most senior cornerback would be Trey Brown if Artie Burns is cut.
Yeah. And Mike Jackson, if you count his practice squad years.
So Trey Brown.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're a guy going into his 3rd year. He's the elder statesman of your cornerback room. If you
and it's still an ultra talented room, and I wouldn't have any problem with that.
Yeah, but you're getting really young too quick.
I think you're depending on Julian Love and Diggs to kind of corral that group, but you do need a corner. I think you do need a corner specifically that's got some gravitas, but if it is what it is, you're not going to let go of one of your young guys in favor of Artie Burns. You're just not. And so it really depends if somebody gets nicked up in this game or, I don't even want to say that out loud, but there's going to be a player that we've mentioned, Joey Blount, Jonathan Sutherland, Jarek Reed, Artie Burns, Kobe Bryant, even I think might be susceptible here to some sort of roster cut that's shocking. That you're hoping you can get onto your practice squad, but you may not be able.
Kobe Bryant made the switch to safety. He's played
100% of the snaps.
100% of the snaps through the through the 2 preseason games.
Yeah,
but hasn't really looked good at any point. He's had a couple of highlight plays of getting in and breaking up a ball, but he's missed a bunch of tackles. Gave up a couple touchdowns. Like there's been some.
The team really
issues.
likes him though. I mean, and he is a good player and he has that potential and he does know how to punch the ball out. And I think being surrounded by other good players gives him the best opportunity. But at what point does the team say, dude, we gave you every opportunity to come up and show and you didn't. And we got to make some tough choices. And I hate saying that from a guy that won the Jim Thorpe Award, 4th round draft pick just last year. You don't want to give up on a kid like that, right?
Well, then why did they move him to safety out from his corner spot?
Because you've got an embarrassment of riches.
Because how many different guys are above him on the depth chart at corner?
And at safety. And the nickels that can play nickel. So you take a look at Julian Love. That's kind of where he took the majority of snaps last year with the Giants. And so he's going to get some run there. Jarek Reed, they just drafted. You already had Joey Blount on the roster. Jonathan Sutherland's apparently showing to the point where he's getting a little bit of a run with first string nickel defense.
Yeah,
Kobe Bryant's been moving around because, and he's kind of lucked out in a way because Witherspoon's kind of been injured. So he's been getting even more show than maybe he would have had everybody been healthy.
Mm-hmm. I think that we're going to see a trade. Honestly, somebody's not making this roster, but I don't think they'll get cut. Whether it be Artie Burns or Kobe Bryant or both. There's some 6th round draft picks
or Michael Jackson
for like a 3rd or 4th. There's some draft picks coming Seattle's way because they just have too many bodies for roster spots.
Yeah. And just the safety, battle between Jarek Reed and Joey Blount and Jonathan Sutherland, that could be for one spot. 2 of those guys might not be on the roster. And if I had to choose right
with Jamal
now
Adams
today,
starting the year on the PUP, I think 2 out of the 3 make it.
Yeah, go build a roster. And I challenge you to keep it at 25. Now, you might not on the defense. You might not be able to. You can go to 26 as long as you have 24 on the offense. But then what do you do with a guy like Nick Bellore?
Nick Bellore.
Right.
You count him as an offensive player instead of a defensive player, and that's how you balance it.
And you had a kid like Levi Bell, show up and take a snap at fullback,
and do the job.
The team might be getting ready to really make some hard choices here. We'll talk about this when our roster prediction show comes up next Sunday, because this is as tough as it's been for us, I think, in 4 or 5 seasons to predict. I really do, especially on these positions we've just been talking about. Everything else is kind of sad, but this defense is in flux right now, especially with Brooks coming back, because that took a spot that one of these guys that we've been talking about was going to get.
It's in flux, but it's in flux in a good way. It's oh my God, we have too many good defensive backs than we have spots. What do we do with this good defensive back we don't want to cut because he's too damn good? Right? That's if that's flux, if that's what you want, right? That's when you have depth. That's when you have guys that you're going to have to cut that could go start for another team. Like Artie Burns.
Yeah.
You're in good shape.
Yeah. No question.
I don't think they're in good in that good of a shape at middle linebacker, but the fact that you get Brooks back and now you're 3 deep at a position where 2 people play. And in reality, 1.5 people play because you're going to be in the nickel probably 60 to 70% of the time.
That's why I'm sneaky suspicion that Seattle goes into that very first game with 3 inside linebackers on the roster.
Yeah. And then especially if you can get a guy like Radigan and into the practice squad, so you have a little bit of flexibility.
Right. And maybe they don't designate Vi Jones. Maybe he gets cut and then they bring him back on as well. I don't know.
Yeah,
especially if he's only 3 weeks away or whatever.
Yeah, I could see them starting him on the IR, and then he has the 4 weeks, and then
but he's got to make it on the 53 to do that.
True.
Interesting. Crazy. I mean, the camp battles this year kind of, we had several of them, and really they've narrowed down to just 2 or 3 really key ones. The Kobe Bryant, Trey Brown, Mike Jackson, Devon Witherspoon thing for playing time, playing snaps, I think is a big one. I think all those guys make the roster. I think Artie Burns is probably going to end up being the guy that gets cut. At least that's where it sits with me right now. I don't know how I feel about it in a week, but we'll see. And Jarek Reed and Sutherland and Blount is another interesting one. Jarek Reed's had 5 tackles, 1 pass breakup. There's some positives with Reed. He's looked pretty decent in coverage. He can play both safety spots as well as the slot. So there's some diversity there. They really liked him. They went out and got him as far as the draft pick is concerned. They had some coaches in his corner. So yeah. And then you've got Sutherland and Blount. I think maybe they let Blount go out of that group. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. And Blount's a guy that if they do cut him, I think gets to the practice squad.
Yeah. I actually thought you were going to say gets picked up by another team. Another team that really needs a special teams player and a guy that can play.
If a team is really looking for a gunner and a fourth safety, sure. But there's going to be a lot of guys released on the same day. And he's a guy that I think you can get through, in part because he didn't play much last year because he was hurt. And so he's not necessarily on everyone's radar as much as he is like yours and mine, who cover this team and focus in quite so in such detail. So I could see it being a situation where they try and get him through to the practice squad. But then again, I think Jarek Reed could make it through to the practice squad for the same reasons. So either of those guys, I think if they get cut, we can probably get them through and then worry about, all that stuff later.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of guys that I would be worried that are going to be picked up. Except for, the outside linebackers.
One guy I'll mention that we never had to mention all training camp was Chris Stoll, the long snapper. Never had any competition. Nobody ever brought, they didn't bring any guys in, no undrafted free agents to even compete with him at all. He's taken every snap. He's gone down and made a couple of tackles first on special teams. Haven't heard a word out of camp about him, which is exactly what you want. So,
well, the fact that he made
job, I think
the fact that he did his job as a snapper and then got downfield to make a play on a punt play, that's a big deal for coaches. Like Izzo and company are going to love that. And that's why you bring a guy like him in. And even though you've got guys that did a great job in the past, because you think this kid can offer you something more and be involved in the coverage units. And when he shows that he can, you go, we picked right. There's no reason to bring anybody else.
Yeah. Tyler Ott did get a job. I saw, I can't remember where he went. I don't know about Tinker, but good luck to him. I think that's it. We kind of went through all the different position battles. It'll be a good game. We'll come back this week and do a preview show, for the Green Bay Packers. Mostly kind of rehashing what we've just talked about essentially. And then that's it. And then we go down to cuts, and 2 weeks later we play regular season football. So we're getting down to the nitty gritty finally, and we'll get this thing going. I think this is going to be a good season. I really do. This is a good roster. It's a good roster.
Yeah, it is.
I'm pretty excited about it. I'm a little concerned with a couple of spots. That defensive tackle spot has me worried. That wide receiver spot all of a sudden has me worried. And I didn't think it was going to be a worry. But I think Njigba is going to be fine long term. Just that short term little window of unknown has me a little freaked out. But anyway, anything else?
No, I think let's get out of here.
All right. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. Seahawksplaybook.com is the website. You can find us on your favorite podcast platforms and YouTube, and hit that subscribe button. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWC Hawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.